Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Homes and Safe Communities, Wednesday, the 6th of November 2024. May I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, can they use the remote raise hand function? If a participant raises their hand via the remote function and is not subsequently invited to speak by the chair, please could they turn their camera on to indicate or place a message in the chat function. When invited to address by the chair, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this is not possible for any reason, please bring this to the attention of the Chair and/or Democratic Services Officer as soon as possible. Please ensure that all debate is verbally raised and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and/or to grab the attention of the Chair or Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should let the chair or democratic officer know. So please, could I welcome all committee and non-committee elected members, cabinet members, our officers, and also anyone watching the live broadcast at home. Moving on to the agenda, beginning with agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any? Councillor Hennessy?
Yeah, tenant liaison member David Dutch.
Okay. Liz?
Apologies received to Democratic from Councillor Hanks. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other apologies? I see no hands going up. Yeah.
Sorry, also just to mention, Chair, that we have a message from Councillor Morgan to advise us that he may be delayed. So just to pass that on as well, Chair. Thank you.
That's fine. Okay, thank you. Right, I see no other hands. We shall go to agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting from the 9th of October 2024. Are members happy to approve? And can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor Hennessy?
Yeah, I propose.
Councillor Lovelock-Edwards?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do we have any? I see no hands, so I will go to agenda item 4, which is the presentation from Emma Wools, the South Wales Police and Crime Commissioner. Would you like to go ahead, please, Emma?
Noswaith, good evening, everybody. Liz, can I just check that you've got the presentation? I'd be grateful if you could share that with members.
We do, yes. Can I just very briefly say before we go ahead into the presentation, I'm awfully sorry to interrupt on that. We do, Chair, perhaps want to offer Dr. Councillor Ian Johnson the opportunity to speak on this ahead of the presentation commencing, as it was his call-in item. Is that okay, Emma?
Of course it is, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much, Liz. Thank you very much, Chair. I wasn't sure if I was going to be asked to speak on this item. It's not actually part of the agenda, but this was a request for consideration to have a presentation from Emma Walls, that's our new Police and Crime Commissioner, obviously elected back in May. I asked that she come to committee as it would be useful for councillors to better understand her priorities for the role and how they will impact upon the Vale of Glamorgan. I also said as part of the request it would be helpful for our Vale of Glamorgan Council representative on the South Wales Police and Crime panel, who I believe is Councillor Perks, to attend, so that we can also better understand how scrutiny of the Police and Crime Commissioner is undertaken. I'll just leave it there. Thank you, Chair, and the Police and Crime Commissioner. I'm just interested to hear what Emma has to say, having been in the post now for I think 6 months. And I'm also interested to hear from Councillor Perks, who I believe is present tonight, as I say, sort of about the Police and Crime panel afterwards, just so that we can understand how that facet of scrutiny accountability works. Thank you very much, Dr. Vale.
thank you, Councillor Johnson, for making the suggestion to invite me to today's committee. So, Noswaith, good evening, everybody. As you know, I'm Emma Walls. I'm the newly elected Police and Crime Commissioner for South Wales. And I really appreciate the opportunity to come to speak to committee today. What I hope to do as part of a very short presentation is to give you a little bit about myself and my background, provide an overview of my approach to developing my police and crime plan, which will of course set the priorities for the force area, and more importantly to illustrate how this is aligning with what matters to the communities of Vale of Glamorgan. Next slide, please. So just by way of background, as Councillor Johnson's already referred to, I was elected back in May 2024, and I've now been in post just under 6 months. It was an absolute privilege to be elected as the first female Police and Crime Commissioner in South Wales, and importantly, the first woman of colour in this particular position across Wales. I think, in fact, I was first elected as the first in the UK, although I now have a colleague who has been elected into England. The opportunity presented in terms of being a representative from an ethnic minority community, I take extremely seriously, and I think is both a responsibility and an opportunity to be able to work to support bridging some of the trust and confidence gaps that we have with policing and the criminal justice system across our communities in South Wales. So just a little bit about me in terms of my career journey and background. So I've spent over 23 years working in the criminal justice or community safety arena. That's both from a South Wales, Wales and UK perspective, in both operational and strategic roles. Principally started my career journey in the probation service, but latterly then I've served as the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for South Wales. And I'm really confident that my experience in that space will provide a really solid foundation from which for me to build, as well as the opportunity to deliver on my responsibilities to the public of South Wales. Next slide, please. So as Commissioner then, I'm really committed to raising the public profile and understanding of the Police and Crime Commissioner's roles and my duties and responsibilities. And to do this, I intend and am committed to take a public and community engagement approach that will be central to the way in which I work in this role going forward. The item that you can see on the top left-hand corner of your screen in terms of responsibility for being the voice for the public means that I need to be regularly hearing from communities in order to accurately reflect and advocate for the issues that matter to them. And that includes forging relationships with community representatives and elected members like yourself, so that I can better understand how we are progressing against priorities and what continue to be the concerns of the communities of South Wales. I'm also committed to increasing citizen participation in my approach to scrutiny and challenge and holding the Chief Constable to account in terms of being able to meet the priorities set out in my police and crime plan, but also that broader endeavour of delivering an effective and efficient policing service. So my first step in ensuring public participation in this approach was public involvement in shaping my priorities and the development of my police and crime plan. You may be aware that I have a statutory responsibility to produce the police and crime plan by the 31st of March next year. And effectively, this will set the priorities for the force and be the document for which I hold the Chief Constable to account in terms of performance. It will also set out how I plan governance and accountability mechanisms so that it can be clearly and transparently seen by members of the public in terms of how they might engage in the process. Next slide, please. So in terms of the development of the plan, I was very committed to the opportunity to undertake what I think is the most comprehensive strategic planning exercise that we've had since my predecessor came into post in 2012. I was keen to make sure that the assumptions and pledges I made during my campaign had been thoroughly tested in terms of communities across South Wales. And so I wanted to commit to ensuring that we had a very wide public consultation and also ensuring that we drew engagement from key stakeholders to further refine the priorities and objectives for the force area. So during my campaign, I set out 5 broad priority areas within which I made some suggestions in terms of how we would look to deliver against those. So local policing, for instance, being committed to ensuring that there is a visible and connected and responsive police service within our local neighbourhoods, particularly increasing and enhancing our offer to schools and further education, and developing relationships with local businesses, particularly being able to combat retail crime. I was also keen at a local level to ensure that we understood where some of the hotspot areas might be or where there's more complex challenges, so that we had a targeted policing and partnership approach in terms of those communities. I also made reference to tackling and preventing crime, and my commitment to ensuring that prevention was central to my approach and model in terms of setting direction. And in doing so, my commitment to want to prioritise and focus on children and young people, in particularly thinking about how we increase support provision for young people and we tackle some of the offending behaviour that we know has increased amongst young people in recent years, particularly around violence prevention. I also wanted to ensure that in that prevention endeavour, we focused on particular crime types that we know can be the driver or the outcome of crime and offending behaviour, such as substance misuse, mental health and trauma. Protecting the vulnerable, in particularly victims of crime and communities. And when I talk about communities, I'm also talking about communities online, given we know the significant influence that that online space has in contemporary life, and how often that drives crime and safety issues that we see on our streets. And under that, I was specifically talking about redoubling efforts around violence against women and girls, particularly around stalking and harassment, thinking about how we tackle exploitation of the vulnerable, and that includes both young people and the elderly, and how we tackle hate crime and community cohesion. 4 was around delivering justice. I have a commitment to work with criminal justice partners and to oversee and ensure the efficient running of the criminal justice service and system. And I wanted to make sure that there is a focus on supporting victims throughout this process, to increase prosecution rates, to think more about how we drive out disparities and disproportionality, particularly for populations such as Black and ethnic minority communities and women in particular. And lastly, I wanted to ensure that the plan set the vision to be future focused. Crime and safety threats and issues are constantly emerging and evolving, and we need a policing service that is able to evolve and keep pace. And some of those objectives would be to look at ensuring that we have more of a representative workforce, so that the force reflects the communities in which it is serving. Thinking also about science and innovation. How do we better use science and innovation to prevent and detect crime? And again, all importantly, a focus on culture and standards, particularly in relation to building trust and confidence amongst communities. So I launched a public survey back in the summer alongside a community grant scheme. And the aim of the grant scheme was to generate local conversations with local community leaders and organisations that could have those conversations on my behalf, so that I could hear from communities in terms of testing my pledges and my thinking to date. Both those forms of consultation, both the survey and the grant scheme, have now closed in mid-October, and we are busy analysing the outcome and the feedback. I also wanted to speak directly to communities, so local businesses, community organisations, members of the public, and our local policing service on the ground. And I did this as part of a series of what I called In Your Community Days. This was focused on each local authority area, of which that series I have now concluded. But the response and the insights that I gained from having that physical presence within different wards and different local areas was so positive that I'm now going to introduce that as a business as usual mechanism to ensure that I am engaging directly with communities to test progress of the plan and policing's response. And that rolling programme will now start in the new year. We do have one strand of consultation that is still ongoing, and that's our professional and business stakeholder consultation, which will close the middle of this month. And that's effectively engaging public bodies and partnerships, including community safety, community and voluntary sector and private sector, again, testing my assumptions, understanding feedback and being able to think about how we refine and set out collaborative action that we will be developing with partners. Next slide, please. So, as I've said before, the plan is very much in development and we are consulting. So the priority areas and the thinking I've touched upon is, as I've said, very much in its development. But to date, we have attracted over 5,000 people who have engaged with this consultation process. The results have been the highest and the most positive engagement rate we've had for the OPCC in South Wales, I think, to date. I'm really encouraged by that, knowing that we've got a diversity of voices being able to inform and shape priorities and a clearer understanding about what is what matters to communities of South Wales. Next slide, please. So in terms of Vale of Glamorgan engagement, I thought this would be of interest to members. So of the survey responses, 9.5% of those came from respondents and residents from the Vale of Glamorgan area. I also had the opportunity to do one of my In Your Community Days and spoke to a range of different organisations, some of which are outlined there on the slide. But that's led to further conversations with the Glamorgan Federation of Women's Institute, Vale Domestic Abuse Services, and a range of others in the area, again, helping me inform and shape and gather insights in terms of priorities and challenges for both local partners and the public. Next slide, please. So what were residents telling us that was important to them in terms of issues of crime and safety in the Vale of Glamorgan area? So very much there was a reinforcement of the need for visible policing presence and engagement with local communities. Purposeful engagement, I think, was a message that was given loud and clear. Also that we needed to give further consideration to older people's needs when designing services, and particularly in relation to domestic abuse and sexual violence, something that is very much perhaps a hidden issue in the older people's community. There was clear support from respondents in terms of interventions and engagement for young people being key, and that engagement being at its earliest opportunity was also something that was set out. And lastly, I think to reinforce my point was around the better communication with the public through varied channels. Again, I think as public services, we can sometimes be narrow in the way that we communicate. And this is about the ability to diversify our communications channels, ensuring that we are reaching all communities who have a clear interest and investment in terms of local policing and safety in their area. Next slide, please. So again, just some further survey insights more broadly in terms of community policing. You can see there that there was clear support, as I've said, for young people, communities and engagement. And I think something that was particularly coming out for the Vale of Glamorgan area was the need to consider in scope rural areas rather than perhaps the focus always being on outer city areas. Next slide. Again, I was pleased that local respondents raised and set out specifically some of their thoughts around prioritising young people, criminal exploitation and combating knife crime, and of course the reinforced need to ensure that we have a robust approach to violence against women and girls. Next slide, please. Again, as I've said, the feedback heavily reinforced some of that early thinking, particularly around confidence overall in the criminal justice system and the necessity to be able to both increase prosecutions, but being able to communicate where those prosecutions have been successful in terms of increasing trust and confidence. And next slide. And I think I'd just point out on this slide in particular that respondents were very clear about the need for further diversity and a response around anti-discriminatory issues within the police service in particular. As I said, we're still in the process of analysing the very rich information that we've had back through this public consultation, and I'm keen to be able to revisit this conversation with you so that I can set out for you the priorities that we have determined following feedback from our communities and when we publish later in this financial year. But could we go to the next slide? I thought it just might be helpful as well to outline the current composition of crime. So although we are clearly making sure that we have got public and professional stakeholder feedback in developing priorities, we've also analysed and looked across a range of other sources of information and data. In particularly for the Vale, we've looked at the highest crime types that are currently undertaken or being undertaken within the Vale area. And you can see that this is 23 to 24, and the offences listed or crime types listed are 80% of the overall crimes that are reported. I hope you can see that this draws real alignment between responding to things like stalking and harassment, which is clearly a significant issue in the area, and my commitment to ensuring that we have set the intention for a more robust response to that. Also, as you can see, violence broadly is a priority in the area, and therefore tackling violence against women and girls, youth violence and knife crime will contribute to the investment in tackling those issues for the Vale of Glamorgan. And lastly, you can see the increase around shoplifting being one of the top crime priorities. And as I've said already, the need to work with local businesses and have a further enhanced effort in terms of driving down retail crime. Of course, policing cannot deliver this alone, so I am looking to ensure that I've aligned my priorities and my thinking within the plan with local government and community safety partnerships so that we are working as aligned as possible with opportunities to collaborate as well as co-commission going forward. And I hope that that partnership working will prove and create benefit and dividends for the people of the Vale of Glamorgan and South Wales wider. So just last slide then, please. In terms of next steps, so I am committed to providing a draft plan to our police and crime panel for consultation in early December. And I will be sharing that draft plan through December to January with wider stakeholder focus groups to test the interpretation of those consultation findings and further refine content. And as I've said then, in March 2025, I will be looking to do a formal launch. So I will pause there. And as I've said, I am more than happy to come back to committee to share the final product and to talk more about the priorities and how I plan to hold the Chief Constable to account and monitor performance.
Thank you very much for that, Emma. I can see a couple of hands are going up. Councillor Hennessy, you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Emma, for your brief outlay of what you have planned for the future. I have two questions. One, could you possibly tell us what you intend to do about antisocial behaviour in our town centres and our surrounding areas? And two, as you know, most of our local police stations have been closed. So our only other one is Barry, and the other one then is in Cardiff. Could you give an assurance that there is no intention of closing Barry Police Station, if possible?
So just on your first question in terms of antisocial behaviour, as I said, I'm already working to identify particular hotspot areas in terms of antisocial behaviour and looking at it strategically. I think there is a response required both in terms of presence of community policing, but also in the round in terms of, in particular, youth support and provision. I know that a lot of feedback I've had from local communities is antisocial behaviour in relation to young people. And I think the feeling is that young people have not necessarily got safe spaces and activities that they need. So I'm very keen to work with partners in terms of how we can invest in terms of provision in order to support and therefore reduce instances of antisocial behaviour within local communities. Secondly, in terms of police stations, obviously the policing estate has been continuously under review. Not all of that, the estate is always fit for purpose. So I know that my predecessor had been working to ensure that sites are maintained and that there is a physical presence in communities. At the moment, there are no plans in terms of closing a police station in Barry. But I think importantly, it's about making sure that we have a policing presence in communities in a range of different ways and ways that we can do in a more agile approach and not just physical large buildings and office spaces. So I'm really keen to explore with both partners and with policing about how we can diversify those a wider presence within communities for local policing teams.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? Councillor Payne?
Thank you, Emma. I'm interested in two things, really, is the increase in road traffic accidents, particularly in the last 2 weeks. You know, what can be done around that? Is it around resources? You know, do we have enough resources? And the other one is the policy on e-bikes. And I have raised this locally around young males in particular on e-bikes. And the response was that they do not stop and they do not intervene at all. So they've been riding on pavements and in various places. And I know that's not just here, that is across the UK generally. But I just wondered, you know, what are we going to do about it, really? Thanks, Emma.
So just on the e-bikes, so the force have for some time been working in terms of a proactive approach to e-bikes. You obviously make the very good point about the appropriateness of intervention and when, because of safety, not just for road users and pedestrians, but also for those using those bikes. The force will continue to have that focus in terms of a target. I see the use of e-bikes as broadly encompassing that wider antisocial behaviour in terms of the use of roads. And I think certainly from the force's perspective, that targeted intervention will continue. But I think we also need to work more broadly in partnership with those who are selling e-bikes, education to parents about the power of e-bikes, again, more safety information that needs to be provided to young people and others who are using them as methods of vehicle choice. So again, I know this proactive approach in terms of how that's being taken forward at the moment.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Lovelock-Edwards.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. That was really useful. I note the stalking / harassment percentage for the Vale. I just wondered if you had any more information on that in terms of a particular age profile of where most of those incidents of crime had taken place, or if it's more, or you don't have that data available, because that really causes me instant concern if that was the sort of key crime that had been committed, and obviously mindful of society, social media, and I think the prevalence of young people being affected by stalking and harassment, and recent calls for changes to legislation. Excuse me. I'd be interested to know if there was a particular age profile or data that you had on that. Thank you.
So, Councillor Edwards, really appreciate your interest in this area. And again, I should have said, just to put into context, that the Vale of Glamorgan hasn't only seen an increase in terms of stalking harassment. This is force-wide and actually a national picture and trend. And the nature of stalking and harassment, although it's categorised in what might seem like one homogenous group, there are a spectrum of behaviours that are encompassed. So this is online stalking and harassment, as well as I suppose what we would call that person contact. I don't have data available to me at the moment to be able to give you a breakdown of age group, and as I've talked about the particular nature of that behaviour, but I would be more than happy to provide that information to you or to committee at a later date.
Thank you. Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, am I here?
I can hear you, but we can't see you.
I've had a lot of trouble with the... do you mind if I don't appear on screen, Chair? Because I'll have to restart the computer, I'm sure, to get it to...
It's okay by me, but what do Democratic say?
That's okay, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, then.
Right, and thank you, Chair, and thank you, Emma. Right, it's just a quick one, really. Much is made about policing in towns, and you have pointed out rural communities, but in the Vale we have a couple of, should we say, large rural communities, such as St Athan and Roos. And we often enjoy the view of policing. I'm wondering, what's your plans to increase our visible policing, i.e. actual PCSOs on the ground? Preferably in the case of St Athan as a ward member, I'd like to see less sharing of our PCSO with local towns nearby.
Again, thank you, Councillor Haynes, and I'm pleased that you've mentioned the role of PCSOs. It was very clear to me when I've been out speaking to local communities that the benefit of a strong relationship and presence of PCSOs in the community is absolutely key to local residents and communities. My pledge is to enhance and protect the neighbourhood officers and PCSOs, or our neighbourhood policing offer, and obviously you know that the UK Labour government has made a pledge for a neighbourhood policing guarantee. At present, we are waiting to see how that develops in terms of understanding what that looks like. But again, I think community policing is not only around our neighbourhood of physical officers and PCSOs, but I'm keen to ensure that partners are also part of those local problem-solving arrangements and community engagement, so that we are utilising finite resources in the best way possible.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the... Oh, Councillor Johnson. Is it okay with the committee for Councillor Johnson to come in? I see no dissensions. Go ahead, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to speak as a person rather than a railway station here. Thank you to the committee for allowing me to come speak. I'm really, it's kind of wrapping up the presentation that we've just had, if that's okay. So thank you very much to the Police and Crime Commissioner for coming here today and giving us the presentation. I appreciate that it's obviously both a high level and strategic role that the Police and Crime Commissioner plays rather than operational. I know that many councillors have opportunities to talk about individual matters, with either their local PC or PCSO in town and community councils, and also in the community liaison committee, where we receive a wider report. In saying that, I think there's some interesting data that was being shown to us there, and it would be interesting to be able to, I think, for the committee perhaps to delve into that in more detail, in future. That includes obviously both the robustness of the recording process and the data that's held, but also the cross-cutting nature. I think we saw stalking and harassment, violence with injury, violence without injury as three of the main categories that were there. And I think both the Police and Crime Commissioner and Councillor Lovelock-Edwards referred to the amounts of violence against women and girls. And I think it would be interesting to, in the context of this committee's role as safe communities, understanding that, and also the engagement with other partners, some of which we do report back into this committee. But I think having a global view of that would perhaps be interesting and useful for committee and for the council in general. I did say at the start it would be helpful to hear from Councillor Perks as our representative on the Police and Crime Commissioner panel. I don't know if Councillor Perks has been asked to prepare anything for tonight. If not, then maybe it might be worth asking her to come back at a later point to give an explanation on the role that the panel plays and the role that she plays on the panel representing our interests there. I did hear, obviously, the Police and Crime Commissioner, suggesting that she would want to come back and present to committee again once the consultation and drafting process of the Police and Crime plans come through. And I'm sure that the committee chair and others would love to take that opportunity if it's being offered. That's all from me, I think, at the moment. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Perks, I was going to call on you and ask if you had anything you would like to add, but I got beaten to it. So go ahead, Councillor Perks.
So I haven't been asked to prepare anything for this evening, but I can just talk in general terms about the makeup of the panel that is there, that what we are, which is a critical friend of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and sort of the reports that we sort of go through and things like that. I can talk very briefly and just give an example of some of the reports that we've had recently. But obviously, as a panel member, I'm looking forward to the draft report that Emma is going to produce for us that we'll see in the December meeting. So the South Wales Police Crime panel that is in effect is made up of councillors from the counties that are actually covered by South Wales Police. And there's also 2 independents on there as well. So we tend to have meetings, I'm going to say 6 times a year. One of those meetings will be where the precept is discussed, and that's where the financial discussions will go around that. And that is a closed session, but that is the panel discuss then what the precept that we've been given by the Police and Crime Commissioner of the year forward, of what their priorities are, what they would like to do. And obviously, as we all know, within local government, our budgets have been cut over the last 14 years, and police budgets have been cut over the last 14 years. So it's trying to actually the service that they want to provide with the money that they've actually got coming in and the priorities that obviously the Crime Commissioner has for them. So recently we've had discussions around right care, right person. And another discussion we've had was around violence against women and girls that Emma came and spoke to the panel about. And within the priorities that were under Alan Michael, we were all set in subgroups, and we might have our specialist areas that we might want to ask questions on if a report was coming up. But obviously everyone in that panel can ask questions as well. So that's just a brief outline of what we do. Obviously, you're appointed. It isn't just that the Vale of Glamorgan said, right, we're going to send Sandra Perks there. You have to be, the Home Office has to agree that you can be on that panel. And it's a very useful sort of panel to be on. Recently, we went and had a look at the stables and kennels in the headquarters, and the conditions of those we looked at. So it's having that ability to actually go and see what's happening in our area. We've also had facial recognition and a talk from one of the senior police officers around that. And I'm trying to think what else we've had discussions around. Generally, sort of the different areas. So if there was problems down in Swansea a few years ago, and then we had the riot in Ely, there'll be discussions around that as well, and what's happening with policing. So it's that sort of level of discussion that we're having. But we also have Emma will be there as the police and crime commissioner, but she'll also bring her senior officers with her, who will be the financial person and somebody else, and I've forgotten. Pardon?
The chief executive.
Chief executive, of course. How could I forget? So, we get those people who'll come in and we can have discussions with them and ask them questions as well. So it's a critical friend that we're there. But if you wanted me to come back and to give more detailed information, I can do that. But I'm happy to take general questions if anybody wanted to ask me a general question.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Perks. Does anybody have any questions for Councillor Perks? No hands. Okay. So we don't really have any recommendations for this apart from noting, but I do have a recommendation I would like to put forward. I would like to make a recommendation that we have an annual report from yourself, Emma. Are you happy to go with this? I would need a seconder. Councillor Littlewood-Edwards? Councillor Littlewood-Edwards, you popped your hands up.
Sorry, sorry, Chair. I was actually seeking clarification because in asking anyone to come back on an annual basis to provide a report, we need to give more consideration to sort of what data we'd be looking for, specific to the remit of our committee or specific to the Vale, how we would then share that report or how we would use that report to benefit this committee, and how we scrutinise the report, because if we already have representation through Councillor Perks in terms of that structure, then having an annual report, I don't think necessarily adds to that. But I'm open to being persuaded otherwise. I'm just always conscious that if we ask for an annual report, what are we asking for, and how do we take ownership or challenge the validity of the comments that are made in the report?
Okay. Yes, I should have been a bit more specific. Sorry. Basically, Emma, you offered to come back to us with an update once the plan is written. Okay. So one, I'd like to ask that you come back with that, and two, any further updates that may be necessary as and when. Okay. Are we happy with that? Councillor Hennessy?
I'm happy to second that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I think that's it now, Emma, for you. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Very informative.
Thank you.
Certainly learned a lot. There's a lot more to the role than I realised.
There is.
Okay, yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
You may feel free to stay or you may leave. It is your choice entirely, but thank you for your time tonight.
I've got to go to another engagement, but thank you very much for the offer. Look forward to meeting you all again.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Bye. Okay, so Agenda item 5 is the draft Vale Glamorgan Council Corporate Plan 2025 to 30. Miles or Mike, who is leading on this one? Hi, Miles.
Chair, thank you very much. So this is a referral from Cabinet of the 10th of October, and essentially committee's been asked to consider the draft document as part of the consultation process. So I've got a quick 12-slide presentation that Liz will hopefully share for me, which will help me take you through the document. Thank you, Liz. So in terms of the presentation, we ask what is the corporate plan and what's it for, how is it structured. I go through the new wellbeing objectives, and I take you through a bit of detail on each of those. We talk about our values and what organisations can expect from us when they work with us. There's some examples of actions from objectives 1, 4 and 5, which are relevant to this committee. Examples of the tackling poverty actions, which is a theme that runs through the document. How we will monitor our performance, the planned timetable and the consultation arrangement. So that's the format of the presentation, Chair. So I'll take you through that in a bit more detail now. So firstly, in terms of what the plan is, and I won't read all this, you're quite capable of reading all this yourself. So firstly, it articulates how we're delivering our duties under the legislation, which for us is the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. As I said before, it sets out 5 new wellbeing objectives. It provides a framework for the planning of our work over the next 5 years and takes us up to 2030. Details is all our key challenges, highlights cross-cutting themes, includes a statement about working together and brings together actions relating to poverty. So we will be audited, scrutinised and judged against the commitments in this plan, as we have been in the previous plan. So next slide, please, Liz. So it was important to us that the plan was as readable as possible because there's a hell of a lot of information in this document. So we wanted to make it easily readable and understood by the public. So this is the structure of it. There's a forward, which explains the purpose of the plan, how we're planning on delivering for our communities. There's facts and figures in there, a plan for the future. So it talks about our drivers for the document. We've listened to the Let's Talk survey, key challenges, including inequalities, poverty, climate change, and a nature emergency. Our commitment to work with others, as I say, our 5 wellbeing objectives, and there's a range of actions, 50 actions with outcomes under each. There's 10 under each objective. Tackling poverty, as I say, is a continual thread through the document. Monitoring and evaluation and appendices in terms of the glossary. So it's still a rather large document, but hopefully it's a more easily readable piece of work than perhaps has been the case previously. So next slide, please, Liz. So in terms of our objectives, these are the draft objectives. So I'll just take you through a bit of the detail. So they're based around people and place. So there's 2 for people, 2 for place, and by place I mean location, physical assets, and of course people is more easily understood. And then the last one is an ambitious objective about being the best council we can be. So in terms of the first objective, creating great places to live, work and visit, we talk about our placemaking plans, Valley regeneration, the economy and tourism, housing and leisure. So that's a large piece of our work. In terms of respecting and celebrating the environment, climate change, net zero, green spaces, active travel. And we've just recently agreed the tree strategy to go back to Cabinet for finalisation. So that's just an element of the work that we're doing as part of the green spaces work. Giving everyone a good start in life. So there's a fairly strong thread through the document in terms of looking out for the vulnerable and looking out for our young people and ensuring they have the best life opportunities, supporting and protecting those who need us. So safeguarding, children looked after, homelessness, adult care and social housing and support. And then lastly, as I say, being the best council we can be. So this is about customer focus. It's about doing the right things at the right time and first, being sustainable financially, managing our assets well, and using digital as best we can to try and reduce our use of resources. So next slide, please, Liz. So our values, which we currently hold and we wear on our necks, on our lanyards, we're suggesting they don't change because they're still relevant. So open, together, proud and ambitious. And there's a few of the headlines in terms of what that means to us. So to be open and honest, giving you chances to be involved in decisions and making sure your voice is heard. One of the issues that came back from the Less Talk survey is that the public thought that their voices weren't always heard, particularly in areas where we've consulted them. So there's some work to be done there. Make sure that people have enough time and different ways to share feedback on council plans, which is a key one. And part of the tree strategy, which went to the economy and regeneration scrutiny last week, dealt with how we acted on the responses provided to the consultation. And it was quite a blueprint, I think, for the way we will be working in the future. We want to provide clear and simple information about grants and opportunities with fair expectation and timelines. And just another one at the bottom, respect our diverse communities and aim for fairness and celebrate Welsh culture. So, as I say, our values are being retained. That's the plan as they currently are now. Next slide, please, Liz. So just some examples of the actions relevant to this committee. I just extracted some. So in terms of objective one, which you've mentioned, one of the actions for us is to increase the supply of good quality and accessible and affordable housing. Improve community safety with a specific focus on tackling antisocial behaviour and ensuring people feel safe at home and in the community. It was really good to hear Emma talking about the work she planned to do in partnership on tackling antisocial behaviour. That is a key issue for us as a local authority and our Safer Vale partnership. And we continue to do good work in that area with the assistance of our CCTV system, which is now working particularly well. So we will be bringing reports back to this committee over time, explaining how the CCTV is detecting crime and in some cases actually deterring crime. So we will continue to work with police and partners on that. In terms of objective 4, our aim is to become a sanctuary, a county of sanctuary, providing inclusive services and support and offering a dignified welcome to all. So our Ukrainian families decided to move into Eagleswell. So this is important to us that we show the right values as a council, and that's something that is carried through in the new plan. And also objective 4, help more people to stay living in their own homes using a range of different types of accommodation. Deliver wraparound advice and support services to prevent homelessness and provide housing options. Again, a matter that's really important to us. And deliver an integrated programme of work to prevent and tackle poverty with a particular focus on our most deprived communities. So, and objective 5 there, which is under the Be the Best Council We Can Be, to improve how services are provided to ensure all are able to access services and information in a way that best meets their needs. Very important. Not everyone is able to take a digital option. Some people still require the use of the telephone and paper format. So it's making sure that whilst we are progressive, we don't leave anyone behind. So next slide, please, Liz. So, as I say, the tackling poverty is a theme that runs through the document. So I'll just pick out a couple of tackling poverty actions. So improve how services are provided to ensure all are able to access them and information in a way that best meets their needs. Focus on families of children living in poverty and deliver wraparound services, which is similar to the one I previously talked about. And increase the supply of good quality, accessible and affordable housing, which is one that does help us tackle issues around poverty. There's one on travel, support a change in how people travel by increasing opportunities for active travel and promoting the need for quality and timely local public transport services. And I'll just pick out another one there. Make sure that there are affordable and accessible ways for people to participate in leisure, play, sport, cultural and heritage activities. So, as I say, there are more. I've just picked out a few for you this evening. So next slide, please, Liz. So when a document is in place, how will it be monitored? So this committee already monitors our performance against the current corporate plan. So it'll be monitored in a very similar way. So it links with the annual budget and the medium-term financial plan. We're looking to rationalise annual plans and closer links with the annual self-assessment process. We want to make that sharper and more integrated. It's important for us that the performance arrangements are able to be scrutinised properly by this and other scrutiny committees. So we've got one eye on that in terms of the development of the annual plans and annual self-assessment. We're going to develop key measures for each objective, more streamlined and timely performance reports, greater focus on outcomes, more themed reports similar to the cost of living and Project Zero progress reports. So one thing I'll say about the corporate plan is it is quite strategic. So you won't see unlimited detail in there about numbers and actions down to the very detail that some of our services operate at. But we will have additional plans to support the document, and they'll either be directorate plans or service plans. And this committee, you know, the scrutiny committees will be responsible for scrutinising those documents. So the finer detail will also be available in some cases where the actual actions within the corporate plan are quite broad. So next slide, please, Liz. So next two slides deal with the consultation arrangements and the plan timetables. As I said, this is a referral from Cabinet the 10th of October. And shortly after that, we launched the consultation process. I've attended one of the public sessions. We're encouraging members of the public to fill in a questionnaire and to give us their views on the draft document. So quite a successful session at Holton Road School, and there's been others all around the Vale. In December, the consultation closes. And then we'll work on the revision of the plan based on the consultation responses. And it comes back then after Christmas through the committee process for final approval in March and the publication on the 1st of April. So if all goes well, then that's exactly what will happen. So this committee will have the opportunity to comment tonight. And then it will go through a corporate process in terms of the corporate scrutiny committee. So next slide, please, Liz. So this talks about what we've done so far. And I mentioned that I attended one of the sessions. There's been other sessions that other directors have attended. So we've had drop-in sessions, stakeholder engagement event, focus sessions with third sector and stakeholders on the relationship statement, 50+ forum AGM, the 7 committee meetings, including voluntary sector and town and community councils, and elected members briefing, and staff engagement, including diverse and GLAM networks and trade unions. So we're trying to get this document out as wide as possible to get the largest and broadest range of comments on it that we can. So there's still time to comment. We would encourage the public to do so. And I think that's the end of the presentation, Liz. So we'll take any questions, Chair, if you're happy.
Thank you, Miles, for that. I actually do have a question before I bring anyone else in. Regarding housing, how will this corporate plan interact with the RLDP? For example, 17% increase in the elderly population, but how will relevant accommodation be developed to create assisted or sheltered housing, etc.? There's a little bit of a lack of detail in this.
Yeah, I think I sort of tried to cover that, I guess, Chair, in my response. It is a strategic document. It talks about increasing amounts of affordable housing, and I think that the detail follows behind. So this committee will see our market housing assessment, which comes here and Mike takes you through. So this is where the detail comes. So in order to get to those levels of affordable housing that we need, you will see then detailed reports coming through this committee as to how we plan to do that. So it's deliberately kept at a strategic level, I guess. It makes it more readable. I think if we put too much detail in there, then you've got to put detail in for all the services. And if you think about things like waste and the things that people got general interest in, it would end up being difficult to read. So you will still get your reports that detail number of units built each year, our demand, what the demand is like, what the number of bed demand is, what the type of accommodation demand is. So you still get that detail coming through this committee. So I don't want members to think that they won't be able to comment on the matters that are really interested in terms of detail. It's just that this report is a strategic level report where not all the detail is actually within the document. But Chair, should you require this report to carry more detail than is within this committee's gift to make that recommendation to go back to Cabinet? But that's an explanation of why it's at the level that it is.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Ludwig-Edwards, your hand was up first.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks again for this, Mike. Can I just draw your attention to section 2.17? And you referenced rationalising certain documents or reports. And at 2.17, it says that work has been undertaken to consider how these elements can improve and evolve further. Is that to ensure that the annual delivery plan is the key document that will allow us and other scrutiny committees to dig down into the sort of the detail of what the corporate plan is trying to achieve? But if I've got that wrong, please, forgive me. But if you could explain for the purposes of the committee what work is being undertaken, and if I've got the right gist of things in terms of where you're going. Yeah,
no problem, Chair. Yeah, so essentially, work is being done in the background in addition to the corporate plan work to make the committee's role a little bit more straightforward in terms of the documents it sees, and to allow a more effective scrutiny process. So there's a lot of documents. There's something like 250 actions contained within the council's service plans, and it's very difficult to have proper scrutiny of that huge piece of work and that large number of actions and documents. So we're trying to make sure everything is aligned better. We're trying to make sure everything is a bit more slicker in terms of its production. But ideally, we want to get scrutiny and those who are having our services to be able to comment better, more effectively. So this is what that's about. This is about trying to make the process easier to challenge, more understandable, and making sure that all our governance documents effectively link together. So that's what that's about. I guess governance and performance management is an evolving process, and we've learned from last year from what we did in terms of our Directorate peer assessments. We've got an ongoing piece of work. The review is about to start next week in terms of the WLGA assessment of our leadership, which we'll also learn from. And then we're hopefully going to provide a suite of governance documents that's a lot more easy for members to follow, for the public to follow, and importantly for committees to scrutinise. So that's the purpose of it, Chair. It's trying to realign things, make sure they're properly aligned and they're more easily understood, and also they're more easily able to be challenged by scrutiny committees and our residents.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Miles, sorry. It's been a long day. Sorry. Thank you, Miles. Miles.
Long day, is it, Belinda? Councillor Haynes, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Chair, and you can see me.
We can see you, yes.
It's a win, maybe not. Anyway, a few points and questions, if you will, Miles, so I will try not to take up too much of your time. First off, I'm a bit perplexed why the number of jobs in the Vale weren't in this document. I suspect it's because we've had constant jobs over the last 20 years, no increase. I would have liked to seen that in here. I'm also a little bit concerned about having the number of responses of 4,000 to a consultation as an achievement. That being assuming every response was from one person. That is less than 3% of the population of the Vale of Glamorgan. I would have thought that was a challenge to increase. Also, I'm obviously, as everyone always knows with me, concerned about placemaking. Much has been made in this document about placemaking in Atlantic Major, Barry, Penarth and Cowbridge. Places that aren't getting very large changes to their communities, yet places where they're having large changes in their communities, such as St Athan and Rouse, and have had large changes in communities. This council constantly refuses to engage with the communities on placemaking and other issues. And I repeatedly will, and I say again, I am happy to take the call tonight to start the process. Broadly, what I'm saying on that matter is, how can you expect residents and town and community councils to engage with you on matters you want them to when you refuse to engage with them on matters they care about? And lastly, since you brought it up, I am interested to know how many Ukrainians have moved into the temporary housing in Atlantic Major. Thank you.
Okay, Chair, I'll try and answer them. I'll probably bring in my colleague Mike Ingram, who's on the call on the numbers, because I don't have the exact numbers to hand. So, 4,000. I understand your point about the low percentage in terms of number of residents in the Vale, but 4,000 responses to a consultation with our level of residents is actually quite good. Because not everyone engages, so it does sound like a low number if you think about the population as a whole. But generally, that's a reasonably high figure. When you look at how many people, for example, responded on the budget consultation, it's significantly higher. So we will continue to try and get that number up, but it's generally quite a high number in terms of our population level. And I guess the better our arrangements with our residents in terms of engagement, the better that figure will be. So we're not suggesting that's it, and essentially 4,000 is a figure that we'll stick with. The more that can comment, the better. But it is reasonably good in terms of our previous consultation arrangement. Placemaking is an issue for my colleagues, so I don't know whether Phil would like to come in, because I don't want to comment and actually crash what Phil is looking to do. But Chair, if that is okay with you on the placemaking part, because it's not my area, so it's essentially one that Phil is involved with. And the last, and so before perhaps we talk about bringing Phil in terms of the jobs in the Vale. I'm not sure, Councillor Haynes, whether you mentioned jobs of people who work for the Vale of Glamorgan or people employed in the Vale. But if that is something that you want added to the document, then that's something we can take back.
Clarity for you that how many people are actually employed in the Vale? It has remained constant for 20 years, by and large.
Yeah. Okay. So again, we can take these comments back, Chair. So, in terms, I'll let other colleagues comment on placemaking and perhaps the number of the Ukrainians who are currently housed at Eagleswell, Chair, if that's okay with you.
Perfectly fine with me. Phil, would you like to come in first?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Haynes. I think on the placemaking front, I suppose one thing I'd say is it's being done across Wales at a town level as a Welsh government priority. But what I think, so it's quite resource heavy. There's funding available to create placemaking plans for each town. But the council has signed up to the Design Commission's placemaking charter, which means that we have to consider the principles of placemaking in all areas of our work. So in every decision that we take. So I think with areas like St Athan and other areas I've been talking to, I was out talking to Dinas Paris Community Council the other day. There are obviously areas like Dinas and St Athan that have got high populations that are actually not classed as towns, and there's other towns in Wales that are going to get placemaking plans with smaller populations. But I think it's about, at this stage, kind of proving the value of the placemaking plans to Welsh Government as well, because I think we've been working very closely with Cowbridge Town Council on the Cowbridge one. Design Commission for Wales very, very happy with that approach, and also the fact that we're trying to consider a lot of the villages that surround and connect Atlantic Major and Cowbridge. So obviously people in St Athan are going to use both of those towns to do various things, and we are capturing the views of people in St Athan about those towns as they use them, not necessarily about St Athan. But I think what we're at the moment, we don't, I'm going to be really honest, we don't have the resources to implement a placemaking plan for St Athan but we do have the council has signed the charter to apply the principles of placemaking in all that it does in St Athan. And I'm more than happy to work with the community council around doing some of the more valuable stuff actually that happens before the placemaking, which is the kind of community mapping, which has gone really well in St Athan in past years. So yeah, I'm more than happy to come out and speak to the community council there. But I'm going to be honest and say we haven't got any funds for an actual placemaking plan for St Athan.
May I come back quickly, please, Chair? I'll take that as a yes.
Just having a bit of problems with my computer. I was going to come and say yes.
First off, I'd like to correct myself. I said 4%. It was 3% of the population of Glamorgan. Back to the placemaking. There's a consultation tomorrow, Phil, about some more houses in St Athan. The last consultation, the planning department turned up. Perhaps some of your department or yourself could pop down and listen to the concerns of the residents there. And perhaps we can have a chat tomorrow and start the conversation, because I appreciate that the Vale of Glamorgan gets money for placemaking in Cowbridge, etc. But people in St Athan pay council tax as well, and their concerns should be considered. And if you haven't got money for it, I understand there is resource problems, but if you reach out, perhaps we can do it on the cheap. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any? Oh, Mike, you were gonna come in on the Eagleswell thing, weren't you? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got figures for last Thursday because the leader, myself, and the chief executive went down to Eagleswell last Thursday, and as at last Thursday, there were 30 families that had moved on to the site, 10 of which were Ukrainians. Given the numbers of families that will be accommodated, obviously we're adopting a phased approach to occupancy of the dwellings, together then obviously with the support resources that I have available for those families to move in. So it will be a phased approach over the next 2 to 3 weeks. In total, in terms of Ukrainian households, it's around 45 families, I believe, in total at this stage. We do have commitment in relation to the wider super sponsorship scheme in relation to Ukrainian families that settled with us over the last 2 years. But at the moment, that was the figure for last Thursday.
Thank you. Councillor Haynes, you just popped up and disappeared. Everything okay?
Sorry, press the button twice. I was just going to say thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Do we have anybody else with any questions? I don't see any other hands. I've heard we've had a few questions, but I don't think we've actually had any clear recommendations. Let me just double check that with Democratic.
I wouldn't say so, Chair. I wouldn't say that anything's been put forward as an actual recommendation as of yet, unless committee want to correct me.
Okay, Councillor Haynes.
I did say I would like to see the number of jobs in the Vale in this document, if you don't mind.
I did miss that. I do apologise. Councillor Whittaker. Sorry, Liz.
I was just going to say apologies to Councillor Haynes for missing out on that. I do apologise.
Oh, honestly, my head today. Okay, so that is the only recommendation we've had, really. And we do, and that we go back and get that put into the report.
I'm happy to recommend that.
You're happy to second it, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, that's it then on this item. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. So the next item is the Home Energy Efficiency Eco4 Flex and Nest Warm Homes Wales. Natasha?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen a moment. Get the presentation set up that goes alongside the report. Liz, is it possible for Democratic to share it for me? It doesn't seem to be.
If we give it a moment,
sharing.
Natasha, sorry, there's just a slight delay. Do you mind holding on a moment, because it is in the process of attempting to share your screen? Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
If that doesn't work, then absolutely we can share them for you.
Thank you.
No, so apologies. It doesn't seem to be working correctly. So we can go ahead and attempt to share on your behalf. If you would just bear with us a moment.
Thank you. Thanks, Liz. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay. Just formally, thank you, Chair, and thank you for inviting me to speak this evening. I've been asked to present a briefing of the Eco4 Flex scheme, considering that winter is approaching and greater energy efficiency measures being required for those most in need in our communities. The full committee report on the scheme is available within the agenda. Next slide, please. So the Eco4 Flex scheme is a UK government scheme that places legal obligations on energy suppliers to deliver energy efficiency measures to domestic premises, which are designed to tackle fuel poverty and help reduce carbon emissions. The scheme is administered by the Office of Gas and Electricity Markets, Ofgem, on behalf of the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. The latest iteration of ECO, known as ECO4, so there has been previous iterations of the scheme, focuses on improving the least energy efficient homes, because only properties in standard assessment procedure, band D to G, can be treated. It also requires a more complete upgrade of those homes, shifting to a multi-measure whole house retrofit approach to achieve an upgrade of a property's energy efficiency rating by 2 SAP bands. Under the Ofgem guidance, the flexible eligibility element of Eco4, known as Eco4 Flex, allows local authorities to set their own criteria for identifying and targeting households that meet the eligibility requirements. Eco4 Flex is therefore a household referral mechanism within the wider Eco4 scheme, which enables local authorities to collaborate with the obligated energy supplier and third parties such as Citizens Advice and the NHS professional healthcare workers to tailor energy efficiency schemes to the respective geographic areas. Eco4 applies to measures installed from the 1st of April 2022 and will cover a 4-year period until the 31st of March 2026. Eco4 Flex is available only to owner-occupied households and private rented sector households that meet the eligibility requirements. So there's a statement of intent, which we formally signed on the 19th of May 2023, which was formally endorsed at Cabinet, which sets out the criteria and our intention to enter into the scheme, which we were formally also required to publish via our web pages as well. The Cardiff Capital Region, so our corporate joint committee regionally, has led on this scheme initially before handing it over to local authorities to run and administer. And they set up the procurement stage and formally procured our delivery partner, which is E.ON. Just to touch on the resource element and how we administer this within the council. So it is acknowledged that this area of work is growing, and it currently sits within the regeneration department. And the promotion of the schemes specifically sits with our empty property development officer. I think it's just to be acknowledged that if this scheme were to grow, we would need to consider further resource for the scheme. Okay. Next slide, please, Liz. Okay, so the scheme. So just some key highlights really there before I touch on some of the key eligibility criteria is that the Vale of Glamorgan was the first to sign up in the region. So we were first local authority to sign up. We were also the first to use the Pathwork software in Wales, and this is the software that we use to help administer the scheme. So It's how we check applications securely with E.ON, our delivery partner. The scheme supports low-income and vulnerable households. And there's 8 companies that we currently have installing in the Vale of Glamorgan. Now, these companies are checked and vetted via E.ON, and they have that kind of agreement and relationship with E.ON. And how the scheme is measured in terms of success, I suppose, is in annual bill savings rather than CO2 savings. Even though naturally there will be CO2 savings, it's more about saving bills for our residents. So just to touch on some of the key eligibility criteria. So properties have to have an EPC rating of D, E, F or G, and the occupier must receive 1 or more means tested benefits, or the occupier is in receipt of child benefit with an income of less than £31,000. This cap applies irrespective of the property size, composition, and region. The occupier can also qualify under a superflex declaration. So this is something that we found in the Vale of Glamorgan that is probably the most common route that we've received applications by. So this covers 4 particular health conditions, and that's cardiovascular, respiratory, immunosuppressed or limited mobility conditions. And it has to come in terms of a letter referral via the NHS or a health board or something similar like that, GP, to make sure that is the correct criteria they're being referred by. And then in terms of the types of upgrades that that residents can benefit from, it can be cavity, solid wall insulation, low carbon heating system, air source heat pumps, boiler upgrades, solar PV, and it doesn't have to be just one of those. It can be a multitude of those upgrades as well. Next slide, please, Liz. So just to give you a flavour really of, firstly on the left-hand side of the slides, the number of properties in the Vale of Glamorgan that are in some of those more specific bands or SAP bands, as I mentioned earlier, that would be eligible for the scheme. So you've got that kind of listed on the left-hand side of the slides. And then the process, just to give you a flavour of how that works with us and E.ON. So applicants can hear about the scheme, very different ways, which I'll touch on in a second on the slides, and contact E.ON. So that's their first point of contact. So even if they come into us, we refer them to E.ON to get that process started. So they submit an application if they're eligible on the passport software, and then it comes to us at that point. We verify that application. So while we have the local knowledge there, we might request further letters from GP surgeries and such like, and we will make sure that application is, we feel 100% eligible for that. And if not, refer it back, ask for some more information as well. We also at this stage, where it might be where residents might be eligible, there might be other things that we can refer them to, other types of schemes and information that we'll try and pass on as well. And then if approved, a declaration notification is created by the council, which is sent to Ofgem. And then at that point, an external surveyor might come out to a property, and then the energy efficiency upgrades are agreed and formally booked in. Next slide, please, Liz. Okay, so just to give you an idea of kind of some of the marketing we have done and are continuing to do for the scheme. So we've done some promotion via Care Repair, attended 50+ forums and citizen advice as well, food bank events. We've sent some information emails out. We continue to signpost via social media. Shared regulatory services have been signposting as well. And we do have the web pages on our website, which I appreciate. Obviously, people have to go on there to find those, but hopefully via a variety of mechanisms there, we've also promoted the scheme. A big one there is also the installers. So the 8 installers that we have installing for us, it's in their interest as well to go out and promote the scheme. So they have also been actively doing that for us. Next slide, please, Liz. So just to give you a flavour of achievements to date, I suppose, and how many applications we've approved. So we've got 53 applications approved, although I've been notified there's been a few more even just this week, and they are coming in regularly. And the lead ward there is Caddock with 7 approved, and Cowbridge is closely followed behind with 5 applications. Next slide, please, Liz. And just to give you an idea of how we're performing in the region as well, so I thought this would be quite useful. And this is listing performance sort of measures and how many applications have been approved for Merthyr Tydfil, Cardiff, and Bridgend, as well as us. And I'm pleased to say we are leading currently, and that's still the case today in terms of applications at 53. Next slide, please. And I thought it would be really useful to give you a case study here that is, I've been told, a regional record to date via E.ON. So we've got a particular resident, an application that came in Cowbridge. It's an off-gas property, a G-rated EPC, so Energy Performance Certificate. They've actually had agreed £98,000 worth of energy efficiency measures, which include things like cavity wall insulation, an air source heat pump, solar panels, and new heating controls, which goes to show the kind of flexibility in the scheme and really looking at property and residents' needs, but also the minute that there's no cap on that kind of financial input, I suppose, at present. Next slide, please, Liz. And then I just wanted to touch on the Nest Warm Home Wales scheme, because this is a similar scheme, complementary scheme, but it is a separate scheme. And this is run by the Welsh Government. The main difference here, there is energy efficiency measures that do take place, but it doesn't have so much of the flexibility that Eco4 Flex has. And some of the measures include insulation, a heat pump, and solar panels, very similar to Eco4 Flex. But one of the main differences between the schemes is that it's also an impartial advice stop as well. So they'll look at information around making sure you're on the best energy tariff, water tariff, check whether you're entitled to any benefits. So again, there's lots of cross referrals there to Eco4 Flex as well. And they'll look at how to lower carbon footprints and install low carbon technology as well. So I just wanted to touch on that it is a scheme that we promote, that we are aware of, but it is a separate scheme to Eco4 Flex, of which we support the administration of. Okay, thank you. I think that's the last slide, Liz. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Any questions?
Thank you very much for that, Natasha. I asked my questions in the agenda conference. Does anybody else have any? Okay, Councillor Lloyd-Selby, followed by Councillor Payne.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Natasha, for taking us through that presentation. Really, really helpful, really clear. I just wanted to talk to you about the demographics around take-up. So it's really good to see that people who perhaps are experiencing some health difficulties are being supported to apply. But I was a little concerned to hear that that's where most of the applications are coming from. So I'm just wondering, I can see you've been engaging with food banks and citizen advice and other organisations that would be supporting people in financial hardship. Do we know why we're not seeing a higher level of applications from people who are struggling financially? And the second part of my question is there a joined up approach? Well, no, I've probably got two bits actually. Is there a joined up approach in terms of some of the other initiatives that the council is using to target people on low income, to make them aware of the support that they're engaged in? I'm thinking particularly of some of the work that's being done in my ward in Buttrells, in terms of that being recognised as having pockets of significant deprivation. And finally, what can we do as local councillors to raise awareness of this with our residents? What's the best way of us supporting them?
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for your questions, Councillor Lloyd-Selby. So starting sort of backwards and working my way up, and what can councillors do? I suppose spread the word, I think, would be the it would be the point there is that we've got lots of information that on our website that we could, we can happily forward out again after this, and hopefully that can be shared around to ward members. In terms of take up and looking at the health versus the financial side, yes, I think at the moment we don't probably have that data, but that's something we could look at, why that might be the case and look into it a bit more, and why the health criteria might be slightly stronger. But one thing we are trying to do is work with colleagues, for example, in council tax and benefits, and look at the minute we haven't quite got there, but we're looking at how we can perhaps share some data there and work out how to target those particular residents who really need that support. So that's something we are actively doing at the moment, and looking at a way we can do it via software, and work out how we can maybe do more of a bit of a targeted approach there as well. Okay.
Thank you. Can I come back in on that, Chair?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So thanks, Natasha. Can I recommend that the information is sent out to ward councillors again, so that we're able to consider ways that we can promote it? And a follow-up question, if I may, in terms of the application process, I've not seen it. So I'm just wondering if that's an obstacle for people, and whether or not there's been any review of the application process, or simply feedback. So if people have been given the information and if they're not applied, it would be good to understand why. And I wonder, I recognise this limited capacity, but I wonder whether E.ON are able, they I assume got the capacity and the money to do this. I wonder whether or not there's something they could be doing to make sure that the application process is as accessible as possible.
Yes.
And whether
absolutely.
that's something that could be picked up with them, just to make sure that we really are doing everything we can to make it as easy as possible for people with an entitlement to apply.
Absolutely. No, I think we do have a really good working relationship with E.ON that we developed over the last year. So that's definitely something we can have a chat to them about, and perhaps even get some of that data from them to say, what is, they do that initial processing stage. So it'd be good definitely to find that out and make sure that we're, like you say, we're doing everything that we can to support those people in need.
Great. Thank you very much.
Councillor Payne, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Natasha. Kind of along the same lines as Councillor Lloyd-Selby, but have you targeted schools at all? Because I work with a lot of young that are in fuel poverty and general poverty who are trying to survive. So targeting schools or other organisations that work with families with young children, possibly?
So we haven't actually yet, but that's a really good suggestion that I really appreciate, Councillor Payne, and that's something we can definitely take back as a team and look at adding to our kind of marketing schedule for sure.
Thank you, Natasha.
Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. Well, you partly answered my question already, Natasha. Thank you. I was going to point out that the council holds a lot of data on people, and we could use that data to obviously target people, since we tend to write to them at least once a year demanding money. That we could use that time to point out that there are schemes available, and I see that you're already trying to do that. So just add into that to help, perhaps point you in the correct direction and some more information there. But there's obviously the disabled badge scheme, because obviously disabled people are often the most vulnerable and get the least benefits. And obviously bus passes. Pensioners are easily identified by the fact they have bus passes. So yes, but I'm glad you're ahead of the ball. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Haynes. It's really useful, and we'll definitely take that back for sure.
Okay, any other further questions or comments? No, okay. Again, there's not really many recommendations for this. A committee happy to note the report? Councillor Hennessy?
Yeah, happy to note.
Councillor Lovelock-Edwards? Councillor.
Happy to second.
Yeah, Councillor Lloyd Selby, you're going to point out I missed something now, aren't you?
Yes, Chair.
Yes.
If it's a recommendation for officers, just that information about the scheme be circulated again to local ward councillors so that we can highlight it with residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I did forget about that. Yes, so are we happy with the recommendation to officers that the information about the scheme be sent out to us again? Yes?
Yeah, happy for that.
Okay, thank you. Honestly, my head. Okay, so thank you for that, Natasha. I don't see any further comments, so thank you. Next item is Youth Justice and Early Support Service End of Year Performance Report. Come on in, Kirsty. Thank you.
Noswyth dda, good evening, and thank you for inviting us to attend the committee meeting tonight in order for us to provide an update on the Youth Justice Service and Youth Justice and Early Support Service end of year performance report. So the period that we're going to be referring to tonight is the period of April 2023 to March 2024. And we're providing this information and scrutiny reporting to enable elected members to provide effective scrutiny and oversight in relation to the Youth Justice Service. So in terms of the information that we are providing tonight, the committee will be no doubt aware that we have much of the funding of the Youth Justice and Early Support Service is subject to grant funding, and there are specific conditions in relation to that through funding via the Youth Justice Board and specific performance reporting criteria that we have to evidence. So the performance indicators which we will report on within this report are the national indicators for England and Wales, which relate to the reduction in first-time entrants into the youth justice system, reduction in reoffending, and reduction in the use of custody. We also provide additional information. We provide local performance indicators as well, which we have agreed to the Vale Glamorgan Youth Justice and Early Support Management Board. And we further drill down on a local basis in terms of reoffending by young people in the youth justice system, reoffending by those children and young people who are undertaking a diversionary intervention, and in relation to the number of victims who participate in restorative justice within the service. Since April 2023, there have been 10 new key performance indicators that we are required to report on from the Youth Justice Board, and these relate to management board attendance, serious violence, mental health care and emotional well-being, education, training and employment. However, unfortunately, we're not in a position to report on that data currently due to national technical software issues between software providers and the Youth Justice Board. So the published data is not being deemed fit to publish because of the errors within the systems. So this won't be published until 2025. However, if I'm moving on, I've provided a report for yourselves, and there is also more detailed information attached in Appendix 1 in terms of the analysis of the performance data. As I've mentioned, we provide local performance measures to try and provide a greater depth of understanding of performance of youth justice and early support services in specific areas. And where available, we provide comparisons across other areas in Wales to provide some greater clarity and greater analysis for your task in scrutiny and undertaking scrutiny. So if I can move on to the first performance indicator in relation to first-time entrants to the youth justice system. So within the 12-month period, which ends in December 23, because these are the national figures, there has been a 10% increase in first-time entrants compared to the same period last year in the Vale Glamorgan. However, the actual numbers of children and young people entering the system is overall decreasing, which is reflective of the significant reduction in statutory interventions across the youth justice system. So this increase actually represents just one child. So in the current period, there within the current period, this relates to 11 children, and last year it related to 10 children. So when we compare performance against other areas, there's been a 10% increase across South Wales, and a 3.7% increase across Wales, and there has been a decrease in the YGS family. However, when I say, and I'm highlighting that the data indicates there's been a 10% increase in first-time entrants in the Vale, overall performance remains really positive. The reason that percentage looks so high is because we have very low numbers of children per 100,000 in the Vale who become first-time entrants. So we've been very successful in relation to this, most successful in terms of Wales in relation to our very low numbers of first-time entrants. So any small variations in the data which may relate to one child will present higher, so it reflects 10%, but that is actually one child. So if we look at the more substantive figure of the number of children within the Vale per 100,000 who become first-time entrants into the system, overall, we have the context of 83 children in the Vale, which is 50% lower per 100,000 than children across South Wales and in Wales. So that equates in South Wales 153 children and 175 children in Wales. So it's really significant to note that we're very much bucking the trend in the Vale Glamorgan, and I will explain to you a little bit about how we've managed to achieve that. However, for the past 3 years, there is increasing rates of children across South Wales and more nationally who become first-time entrants per 100,000. So, for example, in Bridgend, there were 174 children in 2023-24. Neath Port Talbot, our neighbours, there were 199 children. However, we're still remaining stable, and for the past 3 years, we're fluctuating between 80 and 83 children within that period. So we're still maintaining a positive trajectory, which is really evident of strong overall performance, because we're maintaining our numbers while children in neighbouring areas the rate is doubling. So this has been really highlighted as an area of effective and good practice by the Youth Justice Board in Wales, and they've been they sought us out to meet with us to try and understand how we're achieving that, because there is quite a marked difference, and they're looking to obtain learning that they can share with other youth justice services and put on the Effective Practice Hub, which highlights good practice. So one of the things that we do, which we believe has been really effective, is that we have put in place in 2018 a local reoffending tracker. Because the national data is so backdated, if you're looking to utilise that data and put in learning and lessons from that, you're looking at a very extended period of time, so that you have to wait before you're able to make effective actions if you're using that data. So we put in place measures for a local reoffending tracker. It's a simple approach, but it's really effective. And what that enables us to do is maintain a highly responsive and contextualised approach. So we undertake local audits, including multi-agency audits, which we report to board in relation to first-time entrants, any children who become first-time entrants, and any children who will fall within the reoffending criteria. And we are able to look at the learning, what went well, or is there any barriers, and we address those via board. So it enables us to do more of what works, and at an earlier point. That this reoffending tracker has been shared across South Wales, and will go on the Youth Justice Board Effective Practice Hub. And there's been a request for us to undertake a webinar, because our Information and Performance Officer is already working with local services to try and help them, because the Youth Justice Board has been sharing our reoffending tracker and highlighting it has been really successful. So it's something that we are proud of. So we also have a very strong preventative offer within the Vale, and that's been a very targeted response, and very indicative of our focus on prevention and diversion. So we managed to receive some additional funding in the turnaround provision, which was a 3-year multi-year funding, which relates to 3 years, however, which enabled us to provide another staff member within this. However, unfortunately, we've received confirmation. This has come from central government that this will not be continuing after April 2025. So just highlighting it at this point that as with all services, budgetary restrictions may have an impact on future performance. So if I can move now to talk through the reoffending data in itself. So we have 2 rates, the binary rate, and which relates to whether a child within the cohort of 12 months has offended, and the reoffences or reoffenders, which shows the number of reoffences by reoffenders within this period. So the Vale at the reporting point was 50%, compared to the South Wales figure of 37% and the Wales figure of 35.4%. So that is in relation to the national data, which does show an increase. However, this relates to the national tracking. So the national tracking cohort identified this relating to 14 children overall, where 7 of those children reoffended. However, this only relates to, there's a very small proportion of children that we work with who are on statutory interventions. So the vast majority within not just our service now, but across Wales and across England is of the children that we work with are within the preventative and the diversionary sphere, and that's as much as 90% of our current caseloads. Whereas this data literally relates to the much smaller number, which is the approximate 10% for us of the statutory cases. So we also include local performance measures where we track all children subject to preventative and diversionary intervention, as well as children on statutory interventions. And in this live tracking cohort, that relates to 43 children. And within this information, that demonstrates that after 12 months, 30% had reoffended, and they committed a total of 26 offences overall, which equates to 2 reoffences per offending period. So whilst we've noted that increase in reoffending in the national annual tracking, our local measures, which are much more stringent because they relate to our performance in all of our interventions, is 30%, which is below that of South Wales and the Wales measure. And because we have been worked really, really hard to be successful in terms of maintaining low levels of first-time entrants, the cohort of children within the group who progress to statutory interventions are the children who will present the greatest complexity of risk and need. And within this, it's significant to note that although there have been those instances of reoffending, the number of offences which were part of the reoffending is lower than across Wales, with 2.7 in the Vale, and across Wales the number is averaging out at 4.8%. So we will continue to complete 5 reoffending audits and analysis, and ensure that we are looking at identifying any potential barriers or opportunities for learning and evidencing best practice to ensure that we continue to produce the most positive outcomes for the children and communities that we support. So the next performance indicator I need to mention is the custody indicator. So during this period, we unfortunately have had 1 child sentenced to custody, which represented a departure from previous years, as we've had no children sentenced to custody for the 4 years prior to this. However, in relation to this child, this is a child who committed a very serious offence. Initially, we had been successful in obtaining a non-custodial sentence, an intensive support package in the community, following a period of being remanded into custody. However, that child placed themselves in breach of the order, and having been returned to court, then received a 12-month detention and training order. So as a result of that, in terms of our auditing, monitoring, review, We completed a review of the background and the circumstances leading up to that of that child and presented that to the Youth Justice Management Board, and that really did reflect the level of complexity and trauma in that child, and who had a very, very long history with services, and the trajectory to custody and all the opportunities that had been undertaken in terms of trying to really prevent that happening. And as a result of that, the Head of Children and Young People Services subsequently facilitated a wider learning event, which is much wider than the Management Board. Partners from health, education, police, probation, children and young people services and youth justice were all invited to a half-day event. And the aim of the day was to look at undertaking reflections and learning in relation to the early stages of all agencies' involvements, prevention, working in partnership and transition, assessments of need, that child's or young person's voice, how we manage risk, decision making, placement finding and stability, and our role as corporate parents. So there's really positive feedback received from the event, with agreement that similar exercises would be beneficial for other young people with really, really complex needs and a long history of trauma, who have been care experienced children, remain care experiencing children, so that we can share good practice amongst the agencies, and we can look at addressing gaps in provision, so that we can hopefully take some of those lessons moving forward, because that related to one young person, but sadly the trajectory that could relate to a large number of our young children that we work with, who have similarly traumatic, abusive, and difficult life experiences. So if I move on to the access to the restorative justice indicator, which is a local indicator. So we had 61 interventions closing during the period between April 23 and March 24. There were 65 identified victims. All 62 victims were offered direct and indirect restorative justice, and there was an attempt to contact the other 3 victims by phone and letter, although there was no response received and we didn't manage to obtain contact. Where we were able to obtain that contact, we were able to successfully provide 2 victims with direct restorative justice and 20 victims with indirect restorative justice. 4 victims have responded out of this and saying that they were very satisfied with the service. So just to place this in context, engagement in restorative justice is voluntary on part of both the victim and the child and young person. So we have put in a lot of measures in terms of trying to include and encourage and support victim feedback and face-to-face victim engagement, and we've done this in a variety of ways. There have been changes to the performance measures for restorative justice to reflect that, but we had already predated this and had started this work locally before those measures came into effect. So although the numbers are low in terms of that victim engagement and feedback, and particularly in relation to the engagement of the surveys and the questionnaires. This is a national across Wales. This is a real challenge for all youth justice and early support services. But this is something we're very much committed to continuing to provide a real key focus in any attempts that we can to improve this. So just to advise that the Youth Justice Board grant funding for 2024 to 2025 was received on the 8th of August, and we also submitted the Youth Justice and Early Support Service Plan for 24-25 on the 31st of July. So I just wanted to highlight an example of some work with young people that we've been undertaking. So a strong area in relation to restorative justice and reparation, excuse me, is the use of the our full-time reparation officer, who is really fantastic and facilitates a variety of innovative and skills-based projects for young people to undertake reparation in the community. Many of you may have met our officer and seen the amazing work that he does. I'm grateful for those of you who attended our Youth Justice and Early Support Service Open Day, which really gave a really positive opportunity to showcase the work of the service and was extremely well received. But another recent example of some of the innovative practice that we've undertaken is that we've established a reparation project with Cardiff City Foundation. Excuse me, and they have a Boots for Bluebird appeal. Cardiff City Foundation receive and collect donations for football boots, trainers and shin pads of all sizes which have been used. And what they do is they collect these donations. They then provide the donations to the Youth Justice and Support Service. There's a reparation opportunity. Young people can assist in polishing, cleaning, restoring the boots and equipment, which can then be distributed back into the community. And this is something that the children, young people have found really, really positive. But also it gives us the connection to Cardiff City Foundation, who will do a lot of existing charitable work, and they have a huge amount of opportunities for children. So any children who are engaged in this reparation are offered wider opportunities if they wanted to progress those. Such as shadowing, mentoring, visits. Sometimes we've managed to be able to get tickets, t-shirts, a wide range of things because there's a very strong relationship with this. So there's just a picture I provided in the report to highlight just some of the work that we've undertaken. And we've had a big collection of these donations, which we have managed to restore. They've been collected and they've also been redistributed, and they're redistributed to schools and to families and children where financial challenges, understandably, the level of poverty, where we're struggling for equipment, they're donated back. So there has that benefit to the wider community, and other children and young people can then benefit from this in addition. So in relation to that, I think that brings me to the conclusion, unless there's any questions in relation to the reporting requirements.
Thank you very much, Kirsty. I can see Councillor Payne has her hand up.
Thank you, Kirsty. Thank you for that really interesting, comprehensive report. And obviously, bit of positivity is you do well because there's excellent collaboration within council services, with the social services, with social workers, YPAs, youth justice social workers, the police. So there's brilliant collaboration there. And one of the things I just wanted to know in terms of the data within the Vale of Glamorgan, I was looking into it. We've got it by authority, but I would be interested in the data within the Vale of Glamorgan. What areas, you know, we're not going to identify any young people, but what areas are these crimes committed in relation to young people, or what areas are these young people in? So I'd be interested in drilling down a little bit more into the data, if that would be possible.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. That's a really helpful inquiry, and it's one that we've received before. So I have taken that back to my performance and information officer about how we can achieve that. It's going to take some collaboration with the Community Safety Department in relation to the ward data, and we had planned to start that work, but unfortunately there had been quite a lot of long-term staff sickness within that department. However, the staff members are back now. Deborah Gibbs is back, and so we can now start to look at how we can transpose those. So we can identify certain information from our data recording systems. We have a specialist system had to be used by all youth justice systems, but what we really need to do is do that, as I say, in collaboration with the community safety department and that data. So we can look to do that, and that's certainly something we're looking to produce. And I'm sure that Miles and Mike are really happy for us to share that information, and maybe that's something that we can look at how we can drill down and present in the future.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I see no hands up. Getting off lightly today, Kirsty.
It's been a long evening for you, I know, but it was very heartening as well at the beginning with the PCC and the comments that she was making in terms of the priorities of children and so I was it was really pleasing to hear that as well. So that obviously set the context. So I'm getting the benefits at the end as well.
There's been a couple of meetings you've come into here where you've had a few questions to answer, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
As always, thank you very, very much for your presentation. It's always very interesting to hear it and encouraging as well in many ways. Thank you, team, for us as well.
Thank you.
We haven't really had any clear recommendations on that, so our committee happy to move and note the report. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Payne? Councillor Haynes?
I'll move and note, Chair. I'll second.
All right.
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much, Kirsty. As you know, you're free to stay or you can go make a run for it. Is it to you?
Thank you very much. I think I'll make a run for it if you don't mind. But thank you so much and a good evening, everybody.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so agenda item 8 is the social housing delivery priorities and social housing grant update. This is Mike and Nick. Who's taking the lead? Hi.
Hi, Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you, committee. The report before you is twofold. One is to update members on our delivery of affordable housing within the Vale of Glamorgan. And the second part of that, and it's interesting, I think it's been referenced, I think the chair referenced it in an earlier item with regard to numbers and how do we determine type and location of accommodation and volume. I think there was mention of older persons accommodation and that not being particularly obvious perhaps within the discussion that we had on the draft corporate plan. I think Miles referred to the fact that there would be other reports, and I did stop myself from interjecting, that there would be other reports that would come before committee which would delve into the more granular detail. And as luck would have it, and not by design, the report that you have in front of you does give you that granular evidence and information in relation to demand and need in various areas of the Vale of Glamorgan, but also the supply. So where is accommodation being delivered and what are our plans over the next, as a council, but also in terms of part of a wider collective of social housing providers, what priorities are we likely to see coming forward in plans in the future before committees. So as I say, it's not by design. The report before you, members, it also appeared on your forward work programme, and members had previously asked for more regular information on both the Council House Bill programme and, as I say, some of our needs data as well. So Nick is on the call as well. Nick will take you through some of the information in relation to the housing prospectus. And the housing prospectus is a document that we're required to provide to Welsh Government, which indicates to Welsh Government when they are considering their grant allocation priorities, where their grant, they wish to ensure that their grant is spent on the priorities within local areas. So, for example, and of interest, and Nick will lead you through that, there is specific reference to our priorities in relation to older persons housing. There's also reference in terms of our delivery, in terms of where we are delivering older persons housing, either in the very recent past or in the future. So hopefully that will provide some reassurance to committee in terms of the detail and how how we come to actually identify the volume and location of accommodation. Just to lead you through the sort of background to the report, members will be aware that the council holds a strategic enabling function that requires the local authority statutorily to identify housing need within its area. And obviously in the more recent past, we've been part of a cohort of social housing providers who are now able to build in order to meet those needs. As part of the process, we rely on a number of strategic documents in terms of identifying the need and how we are going to deliver that. And you can see within the report, we talk about the local housing strategy, we talk about our rapid rehousing plan, we talk about our rural enabler work, amongst other key strategic documents, which feed in to identifying and then actions to deliver priorities within those strategic documents. One of the things of note, and Miles mentioned it in an earlier response to a question, the local housing market assessment identifies gaps within the local market where the local market is not delivering particular forms of accommodation. And as you can see from the report, the local housing market assessment in its last assessment identified over 1,000 units of affordable housing required every year for the next 5 years based on the analysis. Now, clearly, there isn't enough land, there isn't enough development to actually deliver that scale of building to deliver 1,000 affordable units per year over the next 5 years. And clearly, it does, however, give us an indication in terms of our policy making, in terms of what priority we should be affording to affordable housing in either our planning policies or our local housing strategy, as I mentioned, and the council's own council house building programmes and plans. I think I'll leave it there in terms of the introduction. I think the prospectus is very interesting and will be interesting for members. It is broken down by area, also by property type. Again, I think that was referred to in an earlier response to a question. And I think I think a lot of the discussion at the moment around, particularly around Councillor Haynes's point around placemaking, around the needs of local communities, and the work that the local authority is doing at the moment in terms of its consultation on the RLDP, is obviously raising a number of queries and issues in relation to what is being developed, where, how much, and what type. Much of that will be dictated by the land itself. Much of it will be dictated by land economics, viability. But obviously, much of that will also be influenced by the local housing strategy and the work of our local housing strategy team do in collaboration with our planning colleagues in directing to developers and others what it is we want to deliver and what is viable to deliver. Clearly, we wish to maximise the amount of affordable housing that sites can deliver, clearly based on the numbers that Nick will talk you through in a moment. There is a huge gap and mismatch between supply and demand in the Vale Glamorgan, and clearly the priority of the council is to try and bridge as far as possible, both in terms of its own development, the work of our RSL partners, and also local house builders to deliver social and affordable housing via the programmes that are mentioned within the report. So I'll leave it there, Chair, at the moment. I'll hand over to Nick to talk you through the main detail of the report.
Of course. Thank you, Mike. Would you like to come in, Nick?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Mike. So Mike has hit the nail on the head, really, with the prospectus there. It's what affordable housing we would like to see developed and where, really. We already have a housing prospectus, but we've updated it this year based on refreshed information and also some good practice from other councils as part of our conversations with other local authorities. You know, we review their documents and try and pick out anything that's particularly strong in theirs and incorporate it into ours. So it's a bit of an update, and it's included in the report as an appendix, I think. So providing the RSLs, mainly the housing associations, with our priorities, what we do expect them is to go out and look for opportunities then and bring them back to us and seek our support in order to get social housing grant in order to fund the development. And when we receive submissions from the housing associations, we assess those based on the criteria which is contained within the draft prospectus. And there's three sort of key elements, really. The first is housing need, and possibly the most important aspect there. Is there a strong housing need for that form of accommodation in that area? But it's also based on deliverability. So how deliverable is the scheme? Do the housing association own the land? Have they got planning permission, etc., in place? But thirdly as well, excuse me, also important is sustainability. So is there access to shops, services, transport, parking, all these things as well? So they all get considered in the round, really, when we're considering schemes. And some schemes tick all the boxes and get our support. Others are more of a challenge, really, because, as Mike mentioned, we don't have unlimited funds. So with that in mind, we have to make decisions about which schemes we're going to support and which we're not. So there are occasions, unfortunately, where potential schemes get brought forward, but we choose not to support them because they don't meet as many of the criteria as other potential schemes. Table on page 3 shows that, and this won't be any surprise to anyone on the committee, really, the Barry is the biggest shortfall of affordable housing, and within Barry it's one beds. When we had the local housing market assessment report a few months ago, that the data in that really highlighted that point. So that's a biggie. But the prospectus includes at section 2.6 a number of the key priorities for us. You know, these are the forms of accommodation which we most desperately need, really. So it lists 7 priorities in there, from temporary accommodation and one beds, extra care accommodations included on the list. It goes down, really. So we've got wheelchair accessible and smaller schemes in rural areas as well. So there's a lot of different things there. So hopefully that prospectus gives RSLs, our Welsh Government, and ourselves that ability to sort of prioritise schemes and ensure that we get the right forms of accommodation developed in the right areas, really. Touching then, moving on from the prospectus to new affordable housing delivery and how we maximise that, because as a sort of a relatively small local authority area, it's fair to say I think we're punching above our weight with the amount of grant that we're able to secure and the number of homes that were there, affordable homes, therefore we're able to build. And there's some information in the report as well regarding that. But our social housing grant allocation over the last few years has doubled. There's been extra money by Welsh Government across Wales, really. I think the annual allocation for authorities is 330 million at the moment, but our allocation has doubled to 10 million. But last year we were pleased to be able to secure slippage funding as well of an extra £7 million. And that's because we have so many oven-ready schemes. And what the council and our RSL partners are able to do is to forward fund those schemes. So we're able to effectively over-programme. So if there are funding available at the last minute from other authorities not being able to commit funding in other parts of Wales, we're already on site, we're already in the construction phase, we're already in contract, so we're able to sort of mop up as much of that slippage money as possible, really. And that sort of helps the local Welsh Government ensure that the money's spent, but also ensures that the Vale has a big slice of that allocation. So within the report, I think what we refer to as the PDP, the Programme Delivery Plan, is included in the report, and that's essentially the schemes that we are looking to fund, and most of those are on site and in construction at the moment. But hopefully, it's useful for members to sort of have have an understanding there of the type of schemes we've got going at the moment. So it gives the detail of that. So big investments in social housing, not just through our own development programme and the council, as well as forward funding affordable housing schemes, also finances themselves without grants. So we were able to really ramp up at scale and pace that council housing building programme. But of course, council housing building is part of the picture. The RSL partners also contribute greatly to that. And I suppose the third strand, which is the Section 106 via the planning commitments, really, where the private developers are required to provide affordable housing or contribute to the cost of affordable housing on schemes that are happening in the Vale. And since there's been so much development in the Vale over the last few years, then we have been able to benefit from a lot of affordable housing via the Section 106. So hopefully that might gives a bit of a flavour in terms of the more detail, I suppose, in terms of the prospectus, what its purpose is and how we've put it together and what we're seeking to achieve with that, and also a bit of a flavour in terms of how we're delivering so much social housing development within the borough.
Thank you, Nick. And thank you, Mike, as well. I was just going to ask any questions. I can see Councillor Haynes already has his hand up. If you'd like to come in.
Thank you, Chair. First off, table in 2.14, some clarification. Stadium site St Athan says 10 units. I'm meeting with the developers tomorrow, and I'm pretty sure it's 83.
I think what that refers to, Councillor Haynes, is the social housing grant contribution, because when the site, Welsh Government, agreed with have it under development there, they wanted 50%, and I think the 40% is going to be delivered by the market properties, and then an additional 10% of units was able to be provided on the site. So that additional 10% is delivered by social housing grant. So that table is the allocation of the social housing grant. The sale of properties up there funds the remainder.
But my understanding of that, the sale of the properties that were being sold were going to be social housing anyway.
Yeah, there was 40% of social housing going to be delivered on the site, and then it was possible to deliver an extra 10%, and that extra 10% required social housing grant. So that's why the figure doesn't reconcile with the total number of units are being provided on the site. Right.
Okay. So perhaps the document would be better if, shall we say, clearer for myself and other people, if it actually showed the number of social housing units on the site in total, because it does, whether they are through Harvard or they're sold off as social housing, they're social housing, it's, but anyway, that being said, so it skews the figures somewhat. Anyway, the other thing is, I think these tables are important, and they're important to be clear, because recently I pointed out to a planning committee that in St Athan we need one-bedroom properties. It was the higher end development, which was producing some one-bedroom properties, yet an officer came in and said, no, we need social housing in St Athan. The data shows we need one-bedroom properties in St Athan. We're quite well accounted for and have been due to the massive amounts of social housing that's been built here for non-one-bedroom properties. So I would like to see the data a bit clearer, if you don't mind. So yeah, so it put me off somewhat. So with the sorry, skewed data, it just gets me. So what you're saying is we don't have 126 social houses come in. We've got basically 100 and we've got 75 or something, which is odd.
Councillor Haynes, that table is what I refer to as our PDP, our Programme Development Plan, and that's in a prescribed format, providing in that way for Welsh Government, so they can account for what every penny of their grant funding is going on. So that's talks specifically to the social housing grant. So take your point, though, in terms of the bigger picture. But that table is very much an extract from that report regarding how that social housing grant funding is allocated. This report doesn't talk to the Section 106s or other forms of funding.
Right. That being said, on the data, etc., what are you going to do to build social housing where it's really needed, which is predominantly Barry? What we got in plan, apart from what you're showing on your data here, because that's not going to be enough. And it's all very well building social housing in St. Athan, Roos, Llantyr Major. People don't really want to live there. They will live there because they've got no choice. What's being done to build or provide social housing where people actually want to live?
That program at the moment, that's our main program. Okay, so that's the approved schemes, that's the deliverable schemes that are going to be delivered over the next few years. We do have a reserve program as well of schemes which are potential schemes for the future. So we rack those up. But a lot of the schemes on the reserve program are probably subject to sort of confidential commercial discussions at the moment, so not for sort of publicising really in this report. We've only published effectively what we're in contract and what we're delivering. But rest assured, we're always looking at potential schemes, and we have to look far ahead, because we don't buy land today and develop it tomorrow and move people in next week. There's a very long lead in time to that. So the reserve program very much captures schemes which potentially may be bought at some point in the future, though there may be planning permission provided, but we do take a much longer term view to try and provide the accommodation that we need. But you're absolutely right. The land that we have available and the grant funding that we have available isn't sufficient to deliver all of the homes that we need. So we kind of try and get the best bang for our buck, really, and develop, that's why the prospectus helps us to prioritise really what we need. So we're not spreading that too thinly or developing the wrong forms of accommodation.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, would you like to come in on that?
Yeah, it's just responding to the point around Barry. Most of the council house building developments in the last few years have been in Barry, whether they be the former Brecon Court redevelopment, whether they be the developments at Gibbonsdown, the more recent developments at off Hayes Road or Hayeswood Road. But I would also say that we've also received relatively significant number of affordable housing from the Barry waterfront development. I would say not as much as I would like, given the figures and the numbers that we've mentioned in the report. But there has been significant delivery in the Barry area. One of the areas where significantly there has been less opportunity, I guess, is Penarth as the second largest area, and that purely is down to the fact that land supply for us is a problem as a local authority. But we are negotiating with potential landowners who we could procure and purchase land. In terms of future delivery of sites, particularly in Barry, our most significant site that is in our plan for delivery is the site adjacent to Pencoitry School, where we acquired a significant parcel of land from education. And of course, the work that we will be doing through the regional partnership with Cardiff in terms of our development programme going forward, that site will be a priority and will be front-loaded in that development programme. So just to reassure Councillor Haynes that there has been significant development in Barry. I'm not saying if I had more land, if we had more land available to us to build on, we would consider that. But at the moment, land supply going forward will be a challenge for the council.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Lloyd-Selby.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Nick and Mike, for taking us through the report. I think it's important to note that despite the challenges, which have quite rightly been highlighted, in 2021-22, the Vale of Glamorgan was the second highest deliverer of affordable homes in Wales. And I think given the economic climate that, the Vale and other local authorities indeed have been experiencing over the recent years, it's important to recognise that and to commend officers and partners who've enabled that delivery. And then a question, if I may, just for my understanding. So the prospectus, I think, makes reference to the fact that there's currently no matrix system in place to prioritise schemes that will be in the PDP. And I just wanted to understand, what does that mean in terms of what difference does that make? Does that affect our ability as a council to prioritise funding? So why is that relevant? Because I can see that the report also says that consideration might be given to introducing that at some point in the future. So I assume it has some benefit. I don't know who wants to pick that up.
I don't mind having a go at that, Councillor Salvi, and thanks for, first of all, in terms of the recognition, in terms of the delivery. That is per household, so the Vale has done very well. And I was just this evening, prior to the meeting, really running some reports from Stats Wales in terms of how it's been more recently. I'm pleased to say that the Vale continues to be right up there at the top of the charts in terms of delivering affordable housing. So that's reassuring. We've got a very busy programme this year as well, so we would hope that would be sustained going forward into the future. In terms of the matrix specifically in the prospectus, I think when we drafted this, we wanted to have some flexibility to be able to make decisions about schemes that were brought forward. Some local authorities have adopted a much more prescriptive approach, where they wait and they put numbers in, and it comes out whether either a scheme is supported or not. Based on our sort of local knowledge and our knowledge of the data, we wanted to veer away from that slightly. So, we were giving the RSLs a bit of a steer in terms of what we wanted, where we wanted, and how we would prioritise things. But we also wanted to have a little bit of flexibility, really, where we were able to judge each submission based on its merits. So I think that's what we were trying to get at in the wording of the prospectus.
Thank you, Nick. That's a really helpful clarification. And I have to say, my impression is that there's really good knowledge amongst our officers and among partners about the Vale, around where the need is, about what the state of the market is, around land availability. So, yeah, that makes absolute sense that flexibility has been built into the system. So thank you for clarifying that.
Councillor Payne. Councillor Payne, are you able to join?
Is it not in?
I can hear you now and see you. Yeah.
Yeah, I did press. What happened there? Thank you, Nick. And mine is about kind of land, access to land, in terms of Barry needing one-bedroom properties. So it's about, in problem-solving approach to it, is about repurposing things. There are things that are empty in Barry. I don't know. What do we do about that? How can we solve that? Is it a solvable problem? About accessing land to build. I don't know. And, is there something that is written on it about how we go about solving that issue?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. In terms of land, as Mike said, it's not limitless. And as we've been very successful over the last few years in terms of bringing forward sites for development, it leaves less sites remaining then to do. But we are adopting a bit of a flexible approach, really. So as well as the larger sites, and Mike mentioned Pencoitra School, the town centre gateway, there are some irons in the fire in terms of schemes for Barry. But we've also looked at conversion and acquisitions as well. The Olive Lodge is a scheme the council is developing itself, which we hope to have back towards the end of the year, and that's I think it's 10 years temporary one-bedroom accommodation up there on Port Road. There are other opportunities in terms of existing buildings. and conversion of former office accommodation into one-bedroom accommodation. And of course, we've got the 3 council sites that are hopefully completing in the next few months at Homeview. There's one-bedroom properties on Homeview Phase 2, the former Colcott Clinic site, and also the flats on Colebrook Road, where there's 20 units of flats down there on Colebrook Road being developed. So what we also do if the prospectus doesn't sort of weight that enough in terms of we have sort of monthly conversations with the RSLs really, and we really do emphasise the fact that we want one-bedroom accommodation. When they're, we're not looking for huge concentrations of one-bedroom units, but where they're bringing forward sites, we'd like to see as many one-bedroom units as is possible, and to make it sustainable on that site really. And Homeview is a good example of that, I suppose, where we've got a mixture of bungalows, we've got houses, but we've also got flats as well, to really sort of make that a bit of a mixed community, taking on board the placemaking sort of principles that were spoken about earlier. And so it's with my meeting housing need hat on, I'd just like to see everything being one-bedroom flats, but we've got to take a broader perspective on that and recognise that the sort of mixed sites really, with family homes, bungalows, older people's accommodation, and single-person accommodation, those possibly work better and are more sustainable.
Right, thank you, Nick. And the other thing is the roofs are on the Colebrook property, so delighted to see. Obviously, I live around the corner, so I'm delighted to see that they're coming on really, really quickly now. So hopefully we can have 20 new units up and running soon. So thank you.
Yeah, Nick, I also echo that comment about the Colebrook properties. I have been going past and keeping an eye on the development. They are coming on really well so far. Mike, did you want to come in on that before I bring Councillor Lovelock-Edwards in?
Yeah, it was just to sort of add to what Nick was saying and Councillor Payne was referring to in relation to brownfield or existing accommodation. Of course, we also do work with our colleagues regarding empty homes as part of our empty home strategy, and clearly we have a place to play there as well. But it was the point around placemaking. I've lived in Barry virtually all my life, and there's an opportunity, isn't there? Certainly in terms of if you walk down any main thoroughfare, main shopping area in Barry, look up, and you will see the vast majority of what would have been usable, habitable space unoccupied. We have had conversations with colleagues in relation to I suppose that wider discussion around placemaking in terms of our town centres and the opportunity that could give us as a local authority in relation to the future of some of our more established town centre areas. I've been around the Vale long enough. We have had Welsh Government funded programmes in the past in relation to homes over shops. I was pleased to see the opportunity that some of our RSL partners are looking at in relation to conversion of some of the units. But equally, I think that forms part of a wider town centre strategy. And I know that colleagues, as part of the placemaking work that we're doing, are also working on the future of some of our town centres. So I think there's an opportunity in the future as well for us to play a part as a housing department in terms of some of those conversations.
Councillor Lovelock-Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I actually welcome this new prospectus on the basis that it's a document that's actually proactive rather than reactive, and it gives us an opportunity to dig down into sort of the needs of the community that we want to help shape, rather than trying to plug a gap look at sort of how we've always offered accommodation or tried to offer accommodation historically. So I welcome the document, because for me it's about homes for life. And I'd like to see that, and hopefully that is echoed in the ethos of the document, in that we're not just trying to take someone or a family off the housing list. We are creating a home for them for the rest of their days, and that leads me to sort of wearing my champion for older people's hat on. And I'm really pleased to see that, you know, there's been some significant consideration for the fact that we're an ageing society, that the Vale has an ageing population, and that the needs of people as we grow older and, you know, does alter the needs of the accommodation that people have a right to live in. So I welcome those efforts. I don't particularly have any questions at this moment in time, but can I clarify that that if there are any tweaks on this document, that it is put to us as a committee on a regular basis, so we can review its effectiveness. And that's all I wanted to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nick, Mike, this is very good. I am happy with the prospectus myself. I'm hoping it really does help us achieve our aims. We do been saying for a long time there is a shortage of social housing in the Vale, and we can't really build them quick enough to keep up with demand. So I really hope that
Chair, I don't know if you can still hear us. We're having difficulties seeing your connection there. Vice Chair, did you want to come in?
Only that I was going to, have we lost Chair?
She seems to be connected, although obviously we're having problems. There we are, Chair. Over to you.
yeah, everything just froze. I couldn't hear anybody, and I didn't know if you could hear me, so I thought I'd better leave and rejoin, just in case. Okay. Did anyone hear anything I said?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We did lose you for a moment there, but only momentarily.
Right. Okay. As far as I'm concerned, we have not had any particular recommendations for this, apart from the two that are on the paperwork, and they are that the committee considers the priority areas for the development of new social housing in the Vale, and that committee note the progress being made to maximise the amount of grant available to enable new social housing to be built. Are committee happy to note in respect of both recommendations above? And if so, could I would like to move that. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Ludwig-Edwards.
Happy to, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We have no urgent items into part 1 or part 2. So this brings the meeting to a close. Thank you very much for your time tonight. It's been a bit of a long one. And all I have left to do is remind you that our next meeting is the 4th of December. Thank you very, very much. Enjoy your evening, and I'll see you soon. Bye.